Greetings, my name is Edgar Phillips. I am the tuba player with the Lake Washington Symphony Orchestra, and I'd like to talk to you today about the tuba and euphonium family of instruments and let you consider if you might like to play these instruments in your school band or orchestra. I started when I was a fifth grade student at Ivanhoe Elementary School in Bellevue, and I've played ever since. These instruments are all in the brass family. That means they're made out of the metal brass, which is an alloy, which is a combination, about 2/3 copper and 1/3 zinc. And that makes it strong, and it also makes it malleable, so you can bend it and form it into all of the shapes that you see here. Tubas and euphoniums are like the other brass instruments. They're basically just a tube. So if you look at the instruments, especially these instruments from the back, you can see that it has this main bell, which has very important in how the sound is formed and the intonation. And then this is all the main tube that winds around here, and I will show you that on these other instruments, and you can see that same way. This is an F tuba, and you can see it has the same form. It has a bell, and then it has these bows that get smaller and smaller to form the main tube of the instrument. And let me show you the euphonium. And here is the euphonium, and you can see that same characteristic shape, a bell, and then main tube. The open tube of the instrument plays what we call the harmonic series, and that's a fixed series of notes that any of the brass instruments will play. And let me show you what that sounds like. That's the overtone series of just the tube of the instrument. As you can hear, it's not very many notes. So as early as 1815, inventors started to work on valves that would add lengths of tubing to this main length of tubing. And what those valves would do, by adding the tubing, it would make the main tube longer. And so let me show you what those valves look like. So you can see that there's a length of tubing attached to each valve. If I press down the second valve, it does this, the shortest length of tubing. And then the first valve is attached to this tube that's a bit longer. Combining those two will add both of those lengths of tubing. The third is longer still. And these tubas have fourth and fifth valves, which are unique to the tuba family. And so when I use those valves in combination, instead of just one bugle, I get 7 bugles. So I can use all those valve combinations to play the chromatic scale. So that enables the tuba and euphonium and all the brass instruments to play in any key in a band or orchestra. And that really welcomed the tuba and euphonium into the modern orchestra. So you can see in this tuba, you may have noticed there's 2 different kinds of valves, and those were different inventors working on the same type of system. The valves are in the same order, but this tuba has what's called a rotor system, and that's where a lever here moves this rotor, and that changes the air column to add that tube. Many brass instruments have a piston valve, and it goes up and down like a car piston. And that, which is easier to take apart, uses these ports in the valves to add that length of tubing and lengthen the air column. The instruments have a main tuning slide, and that slide adjusts the length of the main tube, and you can use that to adjust to different pitches in the orchestra or band. And then you can see that each of the slides for each valve has, or I should say, each of the valves has a slide with it, so you can adjust the length of each of those to account for intonation. The nice part of the system is that the valves all work the same way. So if you've played the trumpet or you've played the baritone and you want to pick up the tuba, then you won't have to learn a new sequence of notes. The scale that you learned on the B-flat trumpet will be the same on the B-flat baritone. It'll be the same on the B-flat tuba. You'll play the same notes with the same valve combinations. You just may have to learn bass clef. But that's a nice part of the system. Tubas work the same way as other brass instruments. They're unique in the orchestra and band. As you know, some instruments in the orchestra are struck or bowed, or a reed vibrates. With brass instruments, it's actually your lips that are vibrating. So if you can make that sound with your lips, buzzing it, that gets focused by the mouthpiece. And it's that sound that sets up the air column that vibrates and makes the characteristic brass sound. So really, if I buzz that sound, if I buzz this melody, that's really what I'm doing when I play. I buzz that sound into the tuba, and it resonates that sound. So it's easy to get started. That's a fun thing about brass, and they're fun to play. Lots of airflow, but relatively easy to play and easy to get started. The tuba has a wide range. The fundamental is very low on the tuba because it has a long tube length. On the C tuba, it's about 16 feet. So it can play down at the bottom of the piano, down with the contrabasses and the string basses and the bass trombone. And in the middle range, it can play with cellos and trombones and bassoons. And it has a middle high range. And in its very high range, it plays in the range of French horns and high trombones. Composers like to use tubas in a variety of ways, and it makes it fun and challenging to play. Favorite composer for tuba players is Sergei Prokofiev. He wrote some wonderful parts for tuba. One of my favorites is a piece of film music, and this is called the Lieutenant Kijé Suite. It was one of the first scores written for a major film. And he uses the tuba in a variety of ways, all in this one piece. Part of it is a traditional bass line. This is a bass line for a depiction of a sleigh ride. Sort of traditional oompa, how you might think of tuba, but he finds a lot of unique ways to use it. Another is a melody for a wedding that is in the movie. And another way he uses it that is very unique is to play the romantic melody. So lots of different ways, and all in one piece of music. So the tuba has many different roles, and that makes it a lot of fun to play if you like to do a lot of different jobs in the orchestra or the band. Another famous film score that featured tuba was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I had the wonderful good fortune to meet the tuba player, Jim Self. He is a tuba player in Los Angeles and plays for many, many of the popular films that you have seen and that we all enjoy. He played the tuba part on the score for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and you can remember that famous and powerful moment when the largest of the spaceships appears. And the tuba sound rattles the whole area. That was a very special time for me to get to meet him and hear about him playing on that set. And he actually took me to the CBS studios, which was really fun. So these instruments are made of brass, and sometimes people will say, oh my goodness, they're filling up with spit. It's not actually that they're filling with spit. Your air has a lot of moisture in it. The brass, of course, is a lot cooler than the air you breathe out, so the water condenses on the tubes inside. And that's part of what being a tuba player is. You have to dump that water out, which means taking the valves out. And it gives you a chance to pause. But it is water. So another favorite composer of tuba players is Hector Berlioz. He was a French composer in the 19th century. He wrote a piece called The Damnation of Faust, and the march from that set of pieces has become a very popular concert piece. This was one of the first uses of the tuba in the orchestra. This premiered in 1846. And it took advantage of the tuba's valves and the range and the power of the instrument to be the bass voice in a full symphony orchestra. So this is an excerpt from the Hungarian March from The Damnation of Faust. So I wanted to talk about the euphonium next. This is the instrument I started on when I was in 5th grade. It's very, very fun to play and features a very prominent role in school bands and military bands and brass bands. I can't emphasize enough how fun this instrument is if you are considering switching it to it, especially if you're a trombone player, you can play the euphonium in band like I did, and maybe play the trombone in jazz band. And many people now are playing the euphonium in community brass band, so it's really just a terrific instrument. You can see it's a little different than the tuba. This arrangement was popular with many instrument manufacturers, where you didn't have to use the pinky, which is kind of a weak finger, and you could use the left hand to press that fourth valve, which makes it kind of convenient. It also has some extra tubes that back here, which is called a compensating system, and that again was some inventors had a very good idea to build to compensate for intonation problems that they knew were inherent to the instrument. So it has those unique qualities. It has a beautiful sound, which is why it has the name euphonium. And as I say, it usually fills a melodic role in bands. Let me just play you a little sample of a Sousa March, which is the typical melodic role that you might play in a school band. So the euphonium, again, has a beautiful melodic sound, and is often played in that role in bands. And let me play you a little bit of an Arbin melody again, so you can hear the singing quality of the euphonium. So I would encourage the taking up the tuba and euphonium, or at least trying it out and see if there are instruments that interest you. I have greatly enjoyed playing my whole life. Partly of what I enjoy about the tuba is that it's used in a wide variety of groups. I play in everything from folk bands to symphonies to concert bands to small ensembles and chamber groups. I have many colleagues that have a lifelong love of the instruments and play very, very well at a very high level, and they have all different kinds of professions, and there's community bands, community brass bands that are flourishing now. So that part of it I really encourage. I also, as I know many other people, received college scholarships because I played the tuba, and that is definitely appealing to your parents. So give a strong consideration to playing the tuba euphonium, and at least give it a try.